People think old age comes quietly. It doesn't. It comes the moment people stop asking your opinion and start deciding for you. That's when I understood I had become old in their eyes. I raised them all, not just my children, their children too. I was the one who stayed home when someone had a fever, the one who cooked when money was short, the one who waited at night until everyone came back. I never counted what I gave. I thought love didn't need accounting. When my husband died, I didn't allow myself to fall apart. There were mouths to feed, school bags to prepare, a home that needed to stay standing. I learned to be strong quietly, not loudly, not heroically, just every day. Years passed, children grew up, grandchildren learned to walk. The house that once depended on me slowly learned to live without asking me. At first, they still consulted me. Then they informed me. Then they stopped mentioning things at all. They began to speak around me, not to me. They said things like, "She's tired. She won't understand anyway. Let's not worry her." They thought they were protecting me. What they were really doing was erasing me. I noticed when they stopped lowering their voices, when conversations about my life continued even after I entered the room, about my apartment, about money, about what would be fair. I sat there, stirring my tea, listening. They mistook my silence for confusion, my slowness for weakness. They forgot something important. I had lived through hunger, through loss, through nights when fear was louder than hope. I knew exactly what I was hearing. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, it was the love, because I loved them, all of them. And love makes you hesitate when anger would be easier. That evening, as they discussed my future like a problem to be solved, I made a decision. If I spoke now, they would stop telling the truth. If I pretended not to understand, they would reveal everything. So I smiled, nodded, asked the same question twice, and listened. That was the moment I stopped being just their grandmother and became the only person in the room who understood exactly what was happening. Silence changes the way you hear things. When you don't interrupt, when you don't correct, people forget you're listening. That's when the truth starts talking. At first it was small things, whispers in the kitchen, half sentences that stopped when I entered the room. Then they stopped stopping. They spoke freely, carelessly, as if I were furniture, as if I were already gone. I heard my name used differently, not with warmth, not with respect, but as a problem. What are we going to do with her? She can't live alone forever. The apartment shouldn't be wasted. Wasted. That was the word. My home. The place where I raised them, where I buried my husband, where their children took their first steps. A waste. They discussed dates, not openly, but enough. Later, when it's time, we'll see how long. They didn't finish their sentences. They didn't need to. I sat at the table with my tea growing cold. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. Not because I was afraid, because I was hurt in a way that doesn't bleed but stays. They spoke about money, about fairness, about how much each of them deserved. No one mentioned love. No one mentioned gratitude. No one remembered who paid when they couldn't, who stayed when they left, who gave without asking. Sometimes one of them would look at me, briefly, as if checking whether I was still there. I smiled, nodded, asked something harmless. "What was that? Did you say tomorrow?" They relaxed and continued. That was when I understood something important. They weren't cruel. They were comfortable. Comfortable believing that I no longer mattered. Comfortable dividing my life while I was still living it. I loved them. And that love made the betrayal quieter but deeper. Because it came from people who once held my hand and called me home. That night I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, because of clarity. I replayed every word, every tone, every careless laugh. And I realized they weren't planning against me. They were planning without me. By morning, my decision was made. Not in anger, not in despair, in calm. If they believed I didn't understand, I would let them. If they thought I was weak, I would stay quiet. Because silence, when chosen, is not weakness, it is preparation. People are very different when they believe you are no longer a threat. They speak more freely. They relax. They stop pretending. And I needed them to relax. The morning after that long night, I woke up early. Not because I slept well, I didn't, but because something inside me had finally settled. Fear was gone. In its place was something quieter and far more dangerous. Certainty. I looked at myself in the mirror longer than usual. An old woman looked back at me. Grey hair, wrinkles around the eyes, hands that moved more slowly. They saw this and thought it was the whole picture. They forgot that these hands had held sick children all night and still gone to work in the morning. They forgot what endurance looks like when it doesn't announce itself. That day, I made a decision. I would not confront them. I would not accuse. I would not remind them of everything I had done. Because reminders invite arguments, and arguments make people careful. I didn't want them careful. I wanted them honest. So I became exactly what they expected me to be. I asked questions I already knew the answers to. I repeated stories they'd heard before. I laughed a little later than everyone else. When they corrected me, I thanked them. When they spoke over me, I waited. I made myself small. Not because I was small, but because it made them large. And people who feel large make mistakes. I noticed how quickly they adjusted, how easily they began to talk right in front of me, about paperwork, about options, about timing. They stopped hiding documents, stopped lowering their voices. They even started explaining things to me, slowly, patiently, as if to a child. I nodded. Inside, I memorized everything. At night, when the house was quiet, I sat alone and thought. Not about revenge, about protection. I asked myself one simple question. What do I want my last years to look like? Not what they wanted, not what was convenient for them, what I wanted. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to answer honestly. I wanted peace. I wanted dignity. I wanted to know that no one could take my home with a smile and a gentle excuse. The hardest part was not pretending. The hardest part was continuing to love them while knowing the truth. I watched them play with their children in the same rooms where I had once played with them. I listened to their worries, their complaints. And I understood something painful. They didn't wake up one day and decide to betray me. They simply stopped seeing me as someone who could be hurt. There were moments when I almost spoke, almost said, "I hear you, I understand. This is my life you're dividing." But every time that urge came, I remembered their comfort, and I swallowed the words. Instead, I began to prepare quietly. I gathered papers they no longer paid attention to. I reread old documents, found signatures, dates. I made notes, slowly, carefully, without drawing attention. They thought my silence meant acceptance. They thought my calm meant confusion. They didn't see that my calm was the calm of someone who finally knows what needs to be done. One evening, one of them said, laughing, "Mum doesn't even notice anymore." I smiled, because that was exactly what I needed them to believe. I wasn't pretending to be weak. I was choosing the moment when strength would matter. And while they planned my future, I was securing it. That was when I understood the true power of patience. It doesn't rush, it waits. And then it closes the door very gently, but forever. There is a special kind of freedom that comes when you stop hoping people will do the right thing. Once that hope dies, clarity takes its place. And clarity is very practical. I didn't rush, that was important. Rushing belongs to fear, and I was no longer afraid. I began with listening to myself. Every morning I asked a simple question. What can I do today that protects me tomorrow? Not confrontations, not speeches, protection. I started with papers, the kind no one looks at until it's too late. Old folders, receipts, documents signed decades ago and then forgotten. They thought those things were meaningless. They didn't understand that time doesn't weaken documents, it strengthens them. I went through everything slowly, at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Sometimes my hands shook, not from doubt, from remembering. Each paper was a piece of my life. The apartment I paid for when money was short, the loans I repaid quietly, the signatures made when my husband was still alive. I realised something important. Nothing they wanted had ever truly been theirs. The first visit to the lawyer felt strange. I hadn't sat across from someone like that in years. He spoke politely, carefully. He asked if I understood what I was doing. I smiled. "I understand very well," I said. And for the first time in a long while, someone believed me immediately. We talked about options, not revenge, protection. What could be changed? What could be secured? What could no longer be touched without my consent? Each answer felt like a door quietly closing behind me. I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to surprise them, because they had already excluded me from decisions about my life. I simply followed their example. At home, nothing changed. I continued to smile, to listen, to nod. When they spoke about plans, I asked questions, gentle ones. Will that be soon? Is that expensive? They explained patiently, confidently. They didn't notice how much they were revealing.